everyone. Welcome to the District House.
Is that where I am?
Yeah. And if you are unfamiliar, the District House is a Wednesday evening event through District216, which is a psychedelic social club housed here at Lodo Studios. You all have probably connected with Jacob tonight. He is the founder. And District216 is passionate about a few things: psychedelics, cannabis, art, and music. And so each Wednesday, I have the wonderful opportunity to share space with you all. A couple times a month, we have a guest interview, like tonight. I'll be interviewing Erica Siegal. Welcome. And also, we have roundtable discussions on different topics. This month is psychedelic integration. And each month, we also have a film screening. So visit the District216 website to have access to all of the events. And once a quarter, we have a large party that takes over the whole space. And this month, on May 18th, which is a Saturday, the marquee event, Music and Psychedelics, will be happening here. And I really encourage you all to join us. It's going to be a great event. Jacob is pumped. He just did a fist pump to prove it. Yeah. Cool. Well, my name is Hannah Jo. Thank you, Erica, for joining us tonight. I am excited to hear more about your perspective on how we can support each other in stewardship in the psychedelic renaissance.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Welcome.
You professionally are a therapist, and you offer psychedelic-assisted therapy, which is a gorgeous gift to the world. And you also have a couple, I believe, nonprofits, Nest and Shine.
Shine is the nonprofit. Nest is the therapy company that's based here in California.
Okay. Do you want to tell us more about both of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I founded Nest Harm Reduction and Consulting in 2019. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and so I have a lot of history. I worked on clinical trials from 2014 to 2019, specifically in the MDMA clinical trial world, and also work with ketamine in my practice. And so I founded Nest in December of 2019 to support community outreach and education and psychedelic consumers in the recreational space at events, public and private. And then 3 months later, COVID happened, and my events services company pivoted into a virtual psychotherapy company, since there were no events for a couple of years. And so now Nest has 10 therapists that work at my practice. 4 of us do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. Everyone is trained in psychedelic integration and the support of challenging psychedelic experiences. And we offer psychotherapy services here in California. We also, now that COVID is over and events are back, have been supporting public and private events all over the world, making sure that event producers and their guests have safety protocols in place and allow for people to have an optimal altered state experience if that's what they choose. And then this last year, I founded a nonprofit called the Shine Collective, and we specifically work with survivors of psychedelic harm and abuse. And so we offer education, consultation, and peer support for anybody who might be a survivor of psychedelic harm. And psychedelic harm has a wide range of definition, and so we really work with people from anywhere from poor facilitation, incorrect dosing, unclean drug supply or tainted drug supply, and all the way to people who have been assaulted, criminally assaulted by their practitioners, or have been victims of fraud or financial embezzlement in the psychedelic space.
Wow. All of that is not necessarily new information to me, but you are the first person that I've had the opportunity to speak with where that is your niche interest. And it's so important and so valuable that you're organizing and creating spaces for people to heal after these experiences.
Yeah, thank you. It is, I like to say that I wish I didn't have to do the work that I do. And I wish that people were not getting harmed or assaulted in these spaces. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is how to make safer choices around psychedelic facilitators, psychedelic practice, and really being able to help us embody a healthier relationship with ourselves, with our community, and with these medicines.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that information to us. I am excited to learn from you. And you're going to present for a bit. I'll come back and we'll share a little interview, and then we'll wrap up with audience Q&A. So if you have any questions that come up while Erica is presenting, save them for the very end, and you will have space to ask.
We're going to talk today about psychedelic stewardship. Welcome to the psychedelic renaissance. There's been a massive increase over the past 10 years in psychedelic interest, psychedelic use, and psychedelic access. And so really what we're seeing in the psychedelic renaissance is this unfurling or like blooming of access to these really powerful and transformational medicines. But what we're also seeing in that bloom is a higher increase of harm, a higher increase of people not making the most optimal choices for themselves or knowing how to make the most optimal choices for themselves. And so really, the path into our future begins with an inner exploration of consciousness and a connection to ourselves, our communities, and the limitless, expansive universe in which we exist. And so this is something that is not only an internal process and an awakening of our inner healer, but also a connection to the land that we live on, the communities that we exist in, and the greater cosmos that is this universe. So stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something that's been entrusted in our care. So if we are here saying that we are part of the psychedelic renaissance, part of the psychedelic revolution, whether we are facilitators or consumers, there is this responsibility that we have to take on to be able to hold this sacred practice. So stewardship broadly refers to a form of collaborative planning and responsible management of the environment through sustainable natural resource management practices that respect ecosystem functions. And so this isn't just about like, how do I do it safer, or how do me and my friends do it safer, but like, how do we promote responsibility in the larger ecosystem that we know that we are a part of? And I think that this is a really valuable lesson that we've kind of lost in our humanity, is this connectedness to everything. What we know about psychedelic substances is they can connect us to nature, they can connect us to our loved ones, they can connect us to the divine in this incredible way. And so kind of what roles do we play? Like, how do we show up? Who do we want to be? How do we define ourselves in this community? And I do a deeper dive kind of like workshop format that's not a talk, that's around this, that helps people build their psychedelic identity, or sometimes also their more authentic, ideal, actualized self, and what that looks like and where we think we are on the path to achieving that, and maybe what we can do better to be able to do that. And so I'm going to go through this lovely aspects of optimal psychedelic exploration. One of the things that I found, especially through my work at Shine, is people are reporting harms and abuse in this space because they're not in the optimal setting with the optimal facilitator, with the optimal substance. Really, what we're starting to see is people, and this has happened in many workshops and lectures that I've given and clients that I've worked with, they've been like, wow, I think MDMA is the thing that is like the medicine that's calling to me, the medicine that most resonates with me. But it's not accessible yet, so like, let me go to this ketamine clinic. And then, or I want to work with psilocybin. I don't know where to go to work with psilocybin. That's not really my option. I'm going to instead engage in cannabis use. Oh, sidebar to the cannabis community. Congratulations on your rescheduling announcement. It's going to shift the industry and also pave the way for how we deschedule or reschedule all of the psychedelic substances. And so deschedule, hopefully deschedule, not reschedule. And so it's like people are like, I really feel a calling, or I really feel a calling to, sit with ayahuasca, and I don't know where to go, and I don't have the resources or the money to go to a country in which it's accessible, whether that's Costa Rica or Peru or Colombia. And so this person I know invited me to some mushroom ceremony. I'm going to go do that and psychedelically naive take 5 grams of mushrooms and completely dysregulate myself and end up in these situations of harm. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of when not to take psychedelics, right? If you can't check all the boxes on the scorecard, that means that the timing's not right. And so we're going to go through, what's our purpose? Why are we taking psychedelics? What's our ideal substance? And I know we don't have a ton of time, and so I can give everybody additional substance resources and information and all of that stuff through the District216 website and in the notes of this presentation online. What's the optimal setting for me? Who's the optimal facilitator? And what's the optimal integration? And so we're going to start off with why psychedelics. Why do people take psychedelics? I'm going to shout out Altered States Integration for making this lovely modified Venn diagram. We're all looking for transformation, right? We're all looking to heal, improve, explore, whatever this looks like. And so the first question is, why do you want to take a psychedelic? What is it about it? In which ways do you feel stuck? So some people want to treat their depression or treat their neuropathic pain or have a medical disorder that they're like, this is the thing that I want to treat. Some people are going through existential crisis and looking for spiritual meaning, spiritual exploration. Some people are looking for community, and the ceremonial setting is something that brings them into community. Exploration, curiosity, that is what makes us human, is this conscious, lovely curiosity about what else is out there. Who am I? Recreation. I'm a big advocate of fun, ecstatic joy practices, whether that is substance assisted or not substance assisted. Just finished the 4-night run of Fish at the Sphere, and whether that was substance assisted or not, it was for sure an ecstatic joy practice. And we refer to it as collective effervescence in the research community, is things start to bubble up and then my bubbliness turns into everybody else's bubbliness. You see it at sporting events when people start the wave and things like that. They're referred to as collective effervescence. And then some people, performance, memory, focus. We're finding that people are treating their neurodivergence and ADHD with natural substances instead of pharmaceuticals. Some people find microdosing to be more effective than ADHD medication, and people are kind of starting to figure out what is my optimal performance mindset. And it's okay to want all of these or just one of them and everything else in between. It could be a collection of 2 or 3 of them. But what we also know is that psychedelics will blur the lines. It'll take these 4 circles and push them into one. And if anyone knows how to animate graphics, I would love for somebody to make me a moving Venn diagram. So this is actually like what it's supposed to look like. And it's also really important to know that you don't get to choose, right? You don't get to be like, I'm going to treat my depression at this ketamine clinic. And then you go in and you're like, oh, God, right? And your ketamine anesthesiologist is like, we don't talk about God here. This is a medical clinic. And then we're finding people kind of falling into this misunderstanding, dysregulation, lack of integration, because even in these siloed off, whether it's medical or spiritual or behavioral, is like these psychedelics are going to blur the edges on everything and smush everything together, and you don't get to choose the journey that you go on. And so being really aware of why and how it might affect you. And so I'm going to breeze by these because I know we're time limited. And there is psychedelic support. Psychedelic.support is the website, has put out this free little book of psychedelic substances that is a 45-page beautiful book that goes over the top 8 psychedelics and all of the like chemistry information, side effects, and everything else. And so I can have that link to that PDF shared with the District 216 community. It's a great resource. I've done some content creation for psychedelic.support. It's also a great place to find a psychedelic therapist, a licensed psychedelic therapist if you are looking. They only list above ground licensed psychedelic practitioners on their website. They don't list anything in the underground, and they provide unbiased scientific information about psychedelics. I feel like, I don't really have to go over every single one of these, and this is the kind of psilocybin is now being, in research, is being made in a lab, and we are not using, most of the psilocybin research is not mushrooms. And so I include this in my non-plant medicine slide around MDMA, which hopefully FDA will approve the Lykos's application. I think the deadline for them to make their decision is August 9th. And so this will be, the cannabis rescheduling and the FDA approval of the MDMA really makes us feel like we're in a renaissance. Even though psilocybin is still Schedule 1, there are 2 states that have psilocybin service access, Oregon and Colorado. Oregon just finished treating their 3,000th patient in the past year out of all of their service centers. So we're running another analysis on harms and data out of that. But a lot of people, there's also psilocybin tourism in Jamaica, and so people are accessing it there. Ketamine is the most widely available, also a dissociative and not a psychedelic, although induces altered state experiences. And so there's this I like to talk about psychedelic exceptionalism, and people are like, oh no, plants over substances, or, and also, heroin's a plant-based medicine. And so let's not talk about, plants over chemicals over whatever, this is about making the best decision for us. And so ketamine, Schedule 3, ketamine clinics are all over America. They charge a range of services. I've seen, low income community center ketamine that, is hopefully, Alchemy Community Center in Oakland does low income sliding scale. Nest also does work in a sliding scale. We try to work with whatever our client income is. And I've seen ketamine practitioners charge up to $30,000 for a month of treatment. And so we can also talk about that around making good financial decisions and also there are clientele that will absolutely pay that, but that is who they're serving. They're serving high net worth individuals, and most people can't afford $30,000 a month for ketamine treatments. And so I work with several ketamine doctors. We range our prescription cost anywhere between $250 to $500 depending on the prescriber, and then really trying to figure out a therapeutic model. There is insurance reimbursement that is now coming for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy that just got announced and is starting to roll out. And so depending on what health insurance you have, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is covered by insurance, but only with Spravato nose spray and only in-office clinics. And so no home visits, no in-home services. And so it's really restrictive right now, and we're hoping that that will slowly expand over time. And then LSD, Schedule 1, but just got FDA breakthrough designation for treatment of anxiety. And so we're really looking forward to the next 2 or 3 years of seeing how that's going to roll out in clinical trials. Some of the things that are really challenging with working with LSD is it's the length of duration. It's 8 to 12 hours. And if you're going to have a facilitator with you, it's a lot of hours to pay for a facilitator. And so it's going to be cost prohibitive, but we'll also kind of see what that rollout looks like. Here's my plant medicine psychedelics slide as an addendum to the pharmaceutical psychedelics. And so ayahuasca, a third church just got their approval under religious freedom to be able to possess ayahuasca here in the United States. So now there are 3 religious organizations where you can access ayahuasca: Santo Daime, UDV, and the Church of the Eagle and Condor is the one, and that is the first non-Christian-based ayahuasca community to be able to have DEA access to ayahuasca here in America. But there is a very large ayahuasca tourism industry in Costa Rica, Colombia, South America, Peru. San Pedro is kind of in the same RFRA access, which would be the Religious Freedom Act for psychedelic access. And there is same with the tourism at ayahuasca. There's a lot more kind of San Pedro ceremony down in Peru, in Central and South America. For some reason, less popular in the underground here in America, even though a lot of San Pedro grows much easier here in America. If you're in Southern California, you probably drive past San Pedro cactus all the time. It grows prolifically here in Southern California. Mescaline, which is the psychoactive substance in San Pedro, it takes a lot of cactus. It takes a lot of work to be able to process cactus medicine in this way. And so it tends to be not as popular because it is harder to access. Bufo and 5-MeO. I've been seeing a lot of weird Bufo things in my shine work. And so this is 5-MeO DMT, also known as the God molecule. It's very short acting, 30 minutes to an hour-ish, 30 to 45 minutes is usually the experience. And is known to be one of the strongest psychedelic experiences that you can have, strongest psychedelic substances. Iboga, we're seeing a lot of Iboga talk in America because it is a fairly effective treatment for opiate addiction. There's like a Kentucky Ibogaine project where they're using the money from the opiate settlements that have happened against pharmaceutical companies due to the opiate crisis in America, and redirecting it and trying to open up Ibogaine clinics in areas in America that have been deeply affected by the opiate crisis. And so we're seeing a lot more talk about Iboga. Tends to be one of the more dangerous because of the cardiovascular risk. You need to be under medical supervision. This isn't something that you would take recreationally. This isn't something that you would take on a dance floor or at Burning Man, or it's like you need to be under medical supervision in a clinic, and it's long acting, 24 hours to 40 hours for the experience. And also a lot of weird Ibogaine practitioners out there that I've heard of. A lot of times it is ex-opiate addicts that are inspired to open up these projects. And I've seen a lot of times Iboga facilitators fall back into relapse or not have enough stability in their practice to do long-term care with Ibogaine. Just something to watch out for. I don't see it very often in these communities, but I think everybody I know has been affected by the opiate crisis. I don't know anybody who hasn't lost a friend or a loved one or a cousin we all know somebody who has died from the drug war. Iboga and Ibogaine seem to be the current curious solution for it. these are like the top 8, right? There's a whole bunch more of research chemicals and 2CB and DOI and DOC. And if you want to be a drug nerd and go to Arrowhead, like I support that too. Educate yourself as much as possible. If we're going to be stewards, if we're going to engage in psychedelic stewardship, these are the questions you should be asking yourself, right? Where's this from? Pharmaceutical MDMA that is used in the clinical trials is so incredibly regulated that all of these underground MDMA facilitators that are operating right now are all getting their drugs from clandestine pharmacies, and all of them run the risk of having some sort of adulterant in them. And so please don't trust your underground psychedelic facilitator or community that they're like, oh yeah, it's pharmaceutical grade. Everybody uses that term. It's not. It's made in a clandestine lab. Like, make sure it's tested. Make sure your facilitator has tested it. Ask your facilitator, have they tested it? Ask the facilitator if you can test it before you take it. Or can we test it together? If you don't know how to test your drugs, there are lots of videos on YouTube and instructions, and you can go to places like DanceSafe or Bunk Police and buy testing kits. You can send away samples of things to get them mass spec tested anonymously through drugsdata.org. There are lots of ways to make sure that what you're putting into your body is what you think it is. Where'd you get it from? Where is it tested? Is it ethically sourced? This is important for the Bufo, the ayahuasca community and the Bufo community. Bufo is harvested from the Sonoran desert toad. That is now going extinct because of the psychedelic renaissance. Therefore, lab-made 5-MeO-DMT doesn't have all of the alkaloids of Bufo, but also know that if we continue to overuse Bufo, that we will run out. And the same thing will happen with ayahuasca. And so make sure that if you are consuming these types of plant medicines that are kind of on the endangered list, that you ask your facilitator, where did you get this? What are you doing for reciprocity? Are there organizations that I can financially support that is working with with reforestation projects? Are there, like ayahuasca farms that I can financially support to be able, are there people who are growing the medicine? How do we make sure that we don't run out of these really valuable tools? So do you need to engage in reciprocity? And then also, is this the right substance for me? Right? There's so many psychoactive substances out there. I was just talking to Peter about how coffee is such an incredible, also altered state experience if you go through caffeine detoxes and bring coffee back in. I'm much more mellow on tea, but coffee is like really what an incredible altered state experience that the second hand on the clock, the invention of minutes, is correlated to human consumption of coffee and caffeine. Like right before we started drinking coffee, we didn't really care about how quick minutes were moving, and it like sociologically is one of those things where we all got caffeinated and then started keeping track of time in a more regimented way. And so really looking at, is this the right substance for me? And maybe I need to wait until the right substance appears. So now we figured out substance, which is kind of like the first big one on here, but also common psych, like where are you gonna take it is also really important. Recreational, there is music festivals, events, raves, nightclubs. I like to say that there is just as much healing on a dance floor as there is in a doctor's office, especially people who have medical trauma or have doctors that haven't believed them. Like maybe going into the setting in which you were traumatized is not the best setting for you to engage in your healing work. And so really making sure that you're like, is a doctor's office the right choice for me? For some people, especially who have medical ailments, want to be in a psychotherapy office or a doctor's office or a controlled medical setting, especially people who have severe PTSD. Being in a 1,000-person dance floor and having these breakthrough experiences maybe is not the best choice for you. And so recreational, therapy, ceremonial use, often community, that means it's a group format. Those tend to range between 10 to 50 individuals in ceremony settings. Is this gendered divided? right? If you are a sexual trauma survivor, you might not feel comfortable in a co-ed group, and you might want to be in a single gendered group. And so being able to ask your facilitator, what kind of setting is it going to be? Intentional use. This is, how before psychedelic therapy offices existed, people were getting together with groups of their, close friends, like 4 or 5, 10 people, and like diving into psychedelic experiments, trying to figure out like what's therapeutic. If you look at the Shulgin farm, like Sasha Shulgin, grandfather of psychedelics, especially here in California, would create a new substance and then invite all of his friends over, and they would all take it and write trip reports for him. Like, what was the time? Were the walls melting? Could we have sex on it? That's my favorite Shulgin question. And if it, affected sexual dysfunction, they'd basically be like, great, it's not clinically important for us to research because that's not what we're looking for. And so really, these intentional use settings of friends getting together, trusted friends to communicate boundaries around psychedelics, oftentimes these also involve having a sober monitor or a sitter to make sure that somebody could answer the door. Like if the smoke alarm's going off, somebody can climb up onto a ladder and push the button. And if everybody's too altered to do that, that's an environment in which you might want to designate a sitter. And in these intentional use communities, oftentimes the responsibility of that rotates, right? Just like a designated driver in a group of friends. Microdosing, we're seeing this out of all of the tech bros these days, and soccer moms and everything else, but really kind of looking for sub-perceptual amounts of psychedelic substances that help us in creativity, productivity, and problem solving. And then also people get into problematic use. People get into substance use disorders. They don't integrate substances. It starts negatively impacting their work life and their home life. And we want to make sure that we can talk to our friends that we see falling down into this path and say, hey, I'm worried about you. Hey, I'm concerned about you, right? Being a good steward is also, it's not all love and light. It's also making sure that everybody's okay. And if you're seeing somebody not be okay, it's okay for you to speak up. So here are your main types of facilitators, right? We have, and so you get to choose your substance, setting, facilitator, therapist, licensed medical or mental health provider, often working in one-on-one settings or in two-on-one settings like couples therapy or small group family therapy, guides. I got nothing against guides. I think they're great. I think they actually have way more experience than therapists, especially lived experience, especially guides who have been working in the industry, in the underground for 20, 30 years. And so knowing that these people are not bound by mental health, are often not trained in how to identify mental health symptoms, but also work in this spiritual realm, work in this intentional realm, this all of the other aspects of why we take psychedelics. Really, these are the people that can help create a safe container for you to have experience in. Ceremonialists, oftentimes trained in spiritual lineage, indigenous roots, and also there are ceremonialists that also work with non-indigenous medicines as well, but oftentimes are trained in some sort of spiritual lineage and have a format of how the ceremony goes, an opening, a closing, and oftentimes music-led in the middle. And then peer support. This is like friends. No lived experience, lots of lived experience, no formal training. We all have those friends out there that are the ones we rely on. And it's okay for you to be like, I want to experience this with hey, will you sit for me? Hey, can we trade sitting for each other? And what are our boundaries and how do we negotiate that? And is this this peer support falling into that intentional use container where you have a group of friends that you're doing this work together with? The peer support person doesn't count in this, right? These are people, when I say how to choose a facilitator, this is somebody who you are having a financial exchange with, right? This is somebody you are hiring to be in a position of power And so making sure that every facilitator is trained in adverse events, potential risks, and power dynamics, that they screen their clients for potential risks and establish clear professional boundaries. My favorite thing is the unethical facilitator that then wants all of their patients to invest in their new business. And now they're all of a sudden, there's all these dual relationships of like, yeah, we should totally start a thing together. Like your psychedelic facilitator should never invite you into some sort of like MLM pyramid scheme, right? Like it just should, like it shouldn't happen. And so like the red flag right there. And like a facilitator is the one that holds the power. They hold the responsibility of that because you, as a participant, might be like, I want to do whatever you're doing. You seem awesome. And the facilitator's responsibility is to hold these ethical boundaries and being like, no, we're not going to do that. But your group of peer support friends that maybe you are tripping with and things, that's a great place to like start a business, right? None of you have, there's not a like power differential in there. That they work with other facilitators, not in a silo, and are in a constant engaged case consultation and feedback. Provide informed consent about sessions. Informed consent, I love this term. It involves providing any information, any and all information about what's going to happen during a facilitated session in writing, and then for the client to review along with a verbal review of materials, because how many times has the doctor's office handed you, like, here is a 10-page document of aftercare instructions, make sure you read the whole thing, and you're like, yeah, sure, I'll totally read that, and you never read it, right? And so as a ethical facilitator, you have to be like, here's what's going to happen, and now I'm going to read it to you. So I know that you're listening, and we've gone through every single page, so you know that, like, if things go wrong, that I might use benzodiazepines to like, are you okay with benzos? And people are like, well, I didn't know I was going to get something else in case of emergency. It's like you have to make sure that, because they can't consent to taking additional substances. So you have to make sure that you go over it, you give it to them in writing, you let them leave, and then for at least 48 hours, and then come back and be like, okay, I've heard what you've said, I've read what you've given me, I consent to it. Nothing else is informed consent. Going to some facilitated thing and you walk in the door and they're like, oh, sign that consent form over there. And everybody just signs it and nobody actually reads it. That's not informed consent. And so answers any questions you have, provides a way for the client to provide feedback, right? Your facilitator should be like, how'd I do? But like also anonymously. We're working on building that system right now for psychedelic facilitators. And that's going to be like a anonymized system, hopefully similar to Glassdoor, where employees and employers can give anonymized feedback. So facilitators can actually get like unbiased feedback because you want your facilitator to like you, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, everything was great. Like, because I want to come back because you are the person that's giving me psychedelic access. And so you can't actually get it, like if you solicit it, like if you yourself are soliciting, you can't get unbiased feedback because psychedelics are tools of coercion. And so now we're trying to build a system where there's like a third party that can take in data and then give feedback. Power dynamics. Therapists, facilitators, practitioners, we all have a power differential because clients are reaching out, being vulnerable, asking for help. Psychedelics amplify this. And so it is the responsibility of the facilitator to hold the boundary because all of the clients are going to be like, I want to do, what are you doing next? Like, I want to do the next thing. Like, how do I get more involved? And the facilitator should be like, no, here is my boundary. I'm not going into business with any of my clients. I'm not having sex with any of my clients. I'm not forming deep bonds and going out to girls' lunch with my clients. Like, that's not what therapists do. And it's this fine line between therapists and coaches and like community and friends and blurred lines. And so if you're paying your psychedelic facilitator to facilitate for you, they are your facilitator, they aren't your friend. They aren't your business partner, they aren't your lover. And that can get blurry in this community. So here's my red flags for facilitators. There is a lovely document called Psychedelic Safety Flags, psychedelicsafetyflags.com. It is a living document. We're constantly updating it. But here are the run the other way warnings from me. if they don't provide you screening, substance, or safety information, including use of touch. I love the people that are like, don't you trust me? Like, I don't know you, I don't trust you. But like this whole like mystery, like, oh, like come to this mysterious party and we're gonna take drugs and we're gonna give the substance a special nickname so no one knows what they're taking. Like, run the other way, please. Somebody who works completely alone or only with their spouse and doesn't have teacher, mentor, peer support group, right? I really like communities because you can, like communities of facilitators, because if something, you want to be able to refer people to facilitators that are energetic matches. And if you're not a good energetic match for someone, it's nice to be able to have other people to be able to network with, and also to have other facilitators be like, yo, that was like a weird interaction you had with that client. Like, what's going on? We need people to call us out. Psychedelics inflate people's egos. Like, we need to keep them in check. Somebody who doesn't provide integration support or referrals. A lot of psychedelic facilitators don't have time to do long-term integration with their clients because they are facilitators. And so they should be partnered with people who are able to give their clients long-term integration support. Somebody who doesn't provide financial transparency. This would be the, not to knock Landmark, but like the Landmark model of like, you know, come back in 2 months and pay us another $6,000. And it's like, no, don't. Like, just tell me how much the whole thing's going to cost up front, because I want to know if I can afford it. And then it comes into this manipulation and coercion and all of this. Like, those are the things of high control. Those are the aspects of high control groups that we're trying to avoid. And I've seen this, the lack of financial transparency at certain ayahuasca retreat centers where you go, you drink ayahuasca, and then the morning after, they're like, if you want to keep working with us, we have these long-term integration coaching packages that are like just as expensive as this ceremony. And they coerce people into giving them, you know, double the money that they originally thought they were going to spend. Brings up any sexual subject matter irrelevant to your needs. If you're going in for psychedelic healing and you want to, and it's because of sexual trauma and like you have a sexual issue that needs to be brought up in this thing, great. Your facilitator shouldn't be talking about how shitty their marriage is or how they think that, you know, you've blocked energy in your genital region and they have this special recipe to be able to like unlock all of the sexual healing and energy. And please no. Like, I'm not against sex and psychedelics with your established intimate partner who you have sexual consent guidelines with. But a facilitator shouldn't have sex with a client. Somebody who claims to be enlightened or have special powers. I like to think that we all have special powers, which means none of us have special powers. And have I seen things in psychedelic ceremony that I can't explain that seem totally like special powers? Yes, and also like Earth, linear timeline, grounded, like maybe we're all, you know, space beings in human bodies, but like watch out for the I'm a super special facilitator, or somebody who misrepresents their credentials or training, somebody who says that they're a therapist and they're actually not a therapist. Like, even if they have had therapeutic training, even if they're a medical doctor, but they're claiming to be a psychiatrist, but they're not actually a psychiatrist, right? It's inauthentic, lying, run the other way. So why, right? A lot of facilitators, we lack training in these spaces. We don't, for indigenous healers, they start at like age 5 in some communities. And this is like a pay us $10,000 and take a 10-month training program and like, congratulations, now you can facilitate. That person doesn't have permission from the medicine to facilitate, and they don't have the lived experience to do it either. And so this is capitalism at its best, which is we're going to try to get people access as quickly as possible. Fear of repercussions, people who have clinical licenses who are working in the underground, and there's this like imbalance of honesty and integrity because they have to violate their ethical codes to serve medicine. And people who are, there are facilitators who are like, I want to be in a consultation group and I can't find anybody else to talk to. And so there are now groups forming to kind of help facilitators find each other for peer support. And that's something that Shine is starting to work on as well, is trying to help facilitators who have caused harm be able to have a safe space to be able to be like, that session was wonky last week and I don't know why and I'm afraid to talk about it. And so trying to create confidential spaces for facilitators to improve their practice. What's integration, right? And so we've kind of gone through this like substance, setting, facilitator. How do we integrate it? Integration is a lifelong game. There's no like, I've integrated it, checkbox, what's next, right? This is an unfolding and unfurling. I like to refer to it as psychedelic escrow, which means after you've had a really big psychedelic experience, you put all of your big decisions into a 30-day escrow account. And then you revisit them to make consensual, clear decisions, because it sounds great to, sell off all your worldly possessions and like move into a van and go like live on the beach in Baja for the rest of your life. But your wife and kids don't also appreciate that. And so it's great to want to be like, we're going to move to the jungle and open up a retreat center and all of it. Like, just give it 30 days. You don't have to do it right now. That's okay. And so when we integrate, I like looking at it from these kind of 4 different aspects. How do we somatically, artistically, relationally, and service-based integration? And so somatic is what we feel in our bodies. Oftentimes we want to dance more, move more, stretch more. We have somatic releases. And so anything that helps you get into your body a little bit more helps you integrate your psychedelic experience. Artistic expression. Whether it's visual art or starting to play an instrument. This is big in the ayahuasca community. I know a lot of people that go and drink ayahuasca and they're like, I want to learn how to play the flute. Like, great, learn how to play the flute. That sounds awesome. Like, or at least like pick up a shaker and start playing it with like the music that you're listening to, or learning how to use your voice. Lots of crafting, lots of gardening. That's my big one. I garden a whole bunch. It's springtime, and so I'm loving my flowers. Anything that helps you play in that creative mind. Relationally, right? You can integrate of like how you integrate with your family. Are you going to show up to be a better partner, a better friend? Like, what are the lessons that make you want to be connected? Sometimes it's that person is really harmful to me and I need to take a break from them. I need to reevaluate my boundaries with these people and be able to start integrating my psychedelic experiences so I can be more of my comfortable, authentic, truthful self. How we show up in community, how we relate to spirit, and how we relate to the natural world around us. And so that's nature bathing. That's way more hiking. And Santa Barbara is great for all of this. And maybe it's going to church again. Maybe it's stopping going to church. I did a similar training like this for a religious Jewish organization. And one of the things is like, maybe keeping kosher isn't going to make sense to you anymore. And like, is that okay if the rest of your family is religious? How's that going to affect you? And then my favorite thing is doing service work. If you feel like your ego is inflated and we're going to save the world with psychedelics, I strongly recommend that you go volunteer at a soup kitchen and see how far away humanity is from enlightenment and what it's like to look into the eyes of people who are less fortunate than you and show up for them in that way. Like, the only way that we're going to move the goalpost forward in the psychedelic renaissance is for us to reach back behind us and start pulling people up and pulling people forward. And so really being able to be in service to your community, to the environment around you. I know people who are like, I'm going to become a vegetarian because I don't want to eat animals anymore. That happens frequently in psychedelic communities. Or like, I want to create less waste. Like, I am upset about plastics in this world. And so like really being of service to yourself, to your environment, to the community, super important. And then one last note kind of on psychedelic outcomes and psychedelic safety, because this is where my expertise lies. The majority of people who take psychedelics, 70% of people have recognized that there is some sort of improvement. 23% are neutral. There are 7% of people who report that they are harmed or dysregulated by psychedelics. That's this population that I tend to work with the most. And so really being able to know that out of, even in clinical trials, 7% of patients report severe adverse effects or an increase in suicidality after psychedelic treatment. So when I talk to facilitators, I say, out of the 100 people that you see, are you prepared for 7 of them to have suicidal ideation? And if you're not, if you don't have a safety plan for that, then you shouldn't be facilitating, because you don't know if that's going to be, patients 93 to 100, or if that's going to be patients 1 through 7. And so getting prepared for what we know. What we also know is that of that 7%, almost 40% of those people say that it is the top 5 most difficult experiences of their life, and a third of them report extended difficulties after a year. So we're talking about not like, oops, and now like a couple weeks later I feel better. That means like a third of these people are still experiencing dysregulation a year later. And so we need to build systems that have long-term integration and long-term recovery programs from psychedelic harm. And this is what we're seeing, right? We're seeing emotional dysregulation, visual perceptual changes, self-perceptual changes, and that's a big one. 58% of challenging experiences report that they don't know who they are anymore, don't know what they want anymore. And that leads to a whole slew of issues. I hate my job, I hate my identity, I hate the world that I've created. I don't know who I am anymore. And so they struggle with self-perception. They struggle with, cognitive changes. Like, I'm not thinking clearly, I'm not thinking the way I used to be thinking. And then about 25% have changes in spiritual beliefs, and 17% experience existential crisis. And so these are the harms that we need to make sure that we're addressing when we go into facilitation. And I think that's all I have for you, and we can go into Q&A. I hope that was beneficial and useful. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for that. That was fun. Even though the topics were heavy and important, you made that so receivable, and I appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah. I don't want to be a downer.
No, I honestly feel supported and resourced after that. And
Great.
Especially having the statistics at the end that generally speaking, people have positive, impactful experiences. And also these are things to be aware of. Mm-hmm. And what came to me when I heard that was this idea of holding paradox. And I imagine that some people that you do work with through the Shine Collective or otherwise have impact and positivity that they extract from the experience, will simultaneously maybe have some challenges. Is that something that you see?
Oh, I will say that there is, I don't want to say 100%, but I feel like I'm going to say 100% of the survivors that have reached out to me through Shine over the past 6 months believe that psychedelic medicine is healing and want it more accessible. Nobody wants to see it back in the closet. Every single one of them were like, I was harmed and this is beneficial to society. And so it's amazing to see what this, right? It's a small percentage and everybody recognizes, and oftentimes the survivors are like, it wasn't the medicine. It was the setting. It was the facilitator. It was the dosage. It was not the medicines are bad and shouldn't be accessible. It's no, these medicines should be accessible, and the environment and the people that I took it with were the factors that contributed to my challenges.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I do feel particularly curious if you're available to share a little bit about someone who is in the experience of not knowing who they are anymore, their interests are shifting, how their career and their family feels is different now too. What is the baseline that you extend to them while they're in that state?
I think working with anybody who's in a really dysregulated state is how to get them back to emotional regulation. And so it's like, we don't have to make any of those decisions right now, right? We, as a social worker, it's like, let's create a plan, right? Let's create, let's figure out how to move forward. And also Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you feeding yourself? Are you sleeping? Are you, do you have shelter? Do you have a home that you, a lot of times it's this lack of feeling safe and not knowing how to get back to a feeling of safety. Working with some therapeutic tools, working with mindfulness, oftentimes going out into nature can be really helpful, but not pressuring anybody who is kind of struggling to make immediate concrete decisions. We're reassuring them that, like, it's okay. I'm here to, support you through this. I'm here to be able to carry this for you. Sometimes if you talk to me, do you want me to write things down for you? Do you want to have a tape recorder on so you can go back and play it? Now we have great AI tools that's like can voice to text a whole bunch of things, which we didn't have a couple of years ago. But really being able to help people who are going through a process of redefining themselves, to help them go through that process of what might that look like. And a lot of times people sit in this unknowing for a really long time. And so it's a matter of being able to try things. You can try things and be like, that didn't feel good. And be like, great, we don't have to do that again. We can do something else. And we're finding it with a lot of people who are in jobs that they basically like jobs that their parents chose for them. Right? We see this a lot of like, no, you're going to be an accountant. And it's like, no, actually, like, I want to be an artist. And it's like, but artists can't support themselves, right? This is the issue with capitalism, right? We can't be who we truly want to be because we have to survive. And oftentimes psychedelics reveal who we want to be in a stronger voice. And then we need to make sense of what that might look like. And so slow it down. Slow it down. It takes a really long time to like grow vegetables. Like there's no reason that we are plants. And so like if you're growing yourself, it's like you can't bloom in a day. You're going to bloom over a season. And so helping people reorient to the fact that they don't have to do anything in this moment.
Yeah. That's a really powerful remembrance for all of us, just with where we are at right now, too, because there is such a heavy cultural imposition of the speed in which we are supposed to show up for work and produce. And so to have that support to reorient people back to their cyclical and seasonal way of being can feel really true and supportive. And I like what you said about creating a plan, because when someone is in chaos or emotional dysregulation, then being offered like a start, middle, and end can feel like warming and hopeful, I imagine.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges with working with survivors, especially for people who have had really significant physical, sexual assault, harm while on psychedelics. And this is a good reminder for all of us, which is right now, well, hopefully all of us are on some sort of cognitive baseline and not altered in this space, or when you're watching this. Right now we're on a linear timeline, right? We can experience like the sun is about to set, like it's going to be night. Night is a couple of hours. Psychedelics have severe time dilation where it could feel like a lifetime. And so if you are traumatized while you are under the influence of psychedelics, that trauma actually can feel like a lifetime of trauma. And so what we've heard is, when I was sexually assaulted on psychedelics, not myself, example, when someone is sexually assaulted on psychedelics, it feels like 1,000 sexual assaults, not one, because you're in time dilation. And so what we're seeing is single event trauma presenting as complex PTSD in the aftercare of the assault. And so all of the sudden, it's like, I was assaulted, and then you're in severe CPTSD dysregulation, And then you're getting misdiagnosed as borderline or bipolar, or, oh, we must have missed something in your screening, and basically being gaslit and dismissed when we know that this psychedelic trauma basically immediately causes CPTSD.
And I know that you're talking about how many people are in the careers that their parents have chosen for them or society has chose, and just feeling your precision and passion speaking about this range of topics. I know that you are in your passion and so on purpose with what you're offering to the world and to us tonight. So thank you for bringing this information forward in the ways that you are.
Oh, thanks. Thank goodness this psychedelic renaissance exists, or else I would be a total weirdo. Like, if this is my passion and like the rest of the industry didn't exist around me.
Totally.
You're like, thanks, Mom and Dad, for raising such a psychonaut. Like,
yeah, I feel similarly in my own way. And as you were talking about, how you invite people to not need to jump to a conclusion right now. There's no need to make a decision, but just focusing on cultivating a sense of safety within themselves. I feel like that is also our call to action as individuals in a psychedelic positive community, is that we can all explore how to feel safer and more regulated in our system. So there is an inherent transference when we're interacting with others to create a more co-regulated community. And I wonder if there's any further insight you want to provide us on how we can support our friends and our peers, perhaps in their psychedelic explorations and integration.
I like sharing. I like community sharing. I like sharing what works for me. I like hearing what works for me and doesn't work for other people, and vice versa. A social worker back in 2020 came out with information around how we access safety, and has categorized it into 8 major categories with over 100 suggestions of how we can access safety in ourselves. And oftentimes, and it's divided into like somatic or community-based or things like that. And it's like sometimes like a warm bath, right, works. And some people don't have bathtubs. Some people are like, I really like the smell of this candle. And some people are like, I hate the smell of that candle, right? It's like some people want to have community reflection so they can feel reassured in the decisions that they're making. And some people want to go hide in a cabin in the woods for a weekend and not have anybody kind of have social confirmation around what they're processing. And so really being able, I like to be like, make a menu of 10 things that you know work for you, so that when you're feeling dysregulated, you can just choose one and see if it works. And sometimes it's a weighted blanket, and sometimes it's putting on a fish show and dancing around your kitchen, or going to a yoga class, or, being in a hot tub. Like, we all have these different things. And so being able to be curious, to explore what works for me, and then being able to share, right? I know that gardening works for me for emotional regulation. And so maybe it's, if I have a friend who's having a really hard time, maybe it's like, hey, do you want to come over and like play in the garden for the day? Like, do you want to go on a hike? There's like beautiful places here. Come to the beach and watch the sunset with me, right? And so not only knowing what works for you, but when you know what works for you, being able to reach a hand out and say, do you want to come with me and see if this works for you too?
Yeah, I love that. Offering invitations into the space where you feel safe and joyful and maybe creative, and just invite that shared space with a friend. Mm-hmm. I just want to mention a funny one for me that I've identified recently is brushing my teeth really shifts my vibe. You feel me there?
Okay. So, as someone who has spent many years in recreational psychedelic environments of all different sorts, my favorite thing is somebody who has a really good bathroom box, right? If you're throwing a party and there's your bathroom box, there's toothpicks and and extra tampons for your friends and face wipes and things like that. And Amazon sells these pre-pasted compostable toothbrushes that you can put in a cup in your bathroom, and then when you're having a party or an event over, then people can go into the bathroom in the middle of the party and brush their teeth because they don't have to get their own toothbrush. And it's compostable, so you're not causing any harm to the environment. And they're like, I have some in my car right now for the off chance that somebody needs to brush their teeth. I carry them with me everywhere because it's one of the most satisfying head changes. The other one is a good neti pot. Like if anybody's ever neti potted during a psychedelic experience, talk about a head shift. Like, really.
And for those who are maybe not familiar with that, it's a device where you pour saline solution or warm water through your nasal system, and it goes in one nostril and out the other. It's very clarifying.
It pops your ears, and you get like a full head shift, like from a neti pot.
Totally. So just real quick, and then we'll shift for a second. But on the toothbrush note, I feel you. I have a tongue scraper with me. I'm also really into peppermint essential oils. And like in my community group and my peer group, I am a peppermint princess. And if you've interfaced with me closely, you've probably smelt it. And that as well is not only grounding, but opening and activating. And I very much encourage that exploration. If you're curious, hit me up.
Consensually. Some people are really sensitive to certain smells.
Totally.
So always a consensual essential oil, right? We're starting a new brand.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Consensual.
I love it.
Yeah, totally. Because there's other fragrances and candles, like you said, where I'm a hard no.
Lavender, like there's, lavender, citrus.
Yeah.
There's all these different scents that you can play with. And what a fun game that if you're going to be in an intentional recreational community, that you have a little like activity of smelling things.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. I love that direction that we just went. That felt very playful and lighthearted and relatable.
Same.
Cool. Well, I feel like so appreciative of your coherent and like nutrient dense presentation that you just provided. So thank you for bringing that to us. I want to turn it to the audience and see if anyone has any questions. And I will be offering you the mic. Myself or Jacob will be offering you a mic if you have a question.
I was wondering if someone was having a difficult psychedelic experience, if there was a phone number that you can call.
There is. You can reach out to the Fireside Project. My lovely friend Josh White started the Fireside Project. It is a psychedelic peer support hotline. It is open from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific time, 7 days a week. Don't have the phone number off the top of my head, but you could Google Fireside Project, reach out to them. If you are struggling, you could also call, I think it's 899-988, the warm line, if you're feeling like you're having an emotional crisis. And I was fortunate enough to be in D.C. last year, working with the federal government on psychedelic harm reduction projects. And we were able to give the federal warm line number, saying if somebody's calling in with psychedelic crisis, have them call Fireside. And now we're on the warm lines resource list. So if people are calling in with psychedelic crisis, I'm also advising a poison drug control center that's doing a lot of research right now on tracking 911 calls related to psychedelic emergencies and trying to figure out ways to be able to support 911 responders in what to do in psychedelic crisis. And so you can call Fireside, and they will respond. They're the crisis line. If they're not available, crisis text line or one of the warm lines that's available.
How does one research, especially if they're in the underground, what the source, other than asking the person who's handing it to you, what resources are there to research where this stuff is being produced, or how can you test? You see where my question is going.
Yeah, I see where your question
yeah.
is going, right? And this is kind of the interesting thing with, some people are 1 or 2 or 3 degrees away from the chemist, right? I don't think there is anything. I don't think that there's ethical cocaine out there. I think all of that is deforestation, human trafficking, like, I don't think there's ethical cocaine out there. I do think that there is like ethical mushrooms out there of like, oh, my friends are growing mushrooms, or blah, where did this come from? If you're getting mushroom chocolates, where's the chocolate coming from? Is it ethical chocolate? You know, hopefully if these are the questions that we're starting to ask, then these are what the people who will be creating the product will be aware of and concerned about, right? Right now, nothing. It's like there are Instagram companies out there. There's lots of people selling drugs through social media. And I was at a conference actually where I met Jacob for the first time when we were at the Remind conference, which is a psychedelic business forum. And there were some people there who, you know, work in the manufacturing and supply chain, because we're leveling up out of drug dealing and we're now using business terminology. And so we're going to say manufacturing and distribution. And like for me, I'm like, oh, you have a product? Like, what's the childproofing on your product, right? That's my first question to anybody in that supply chain. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that I needed to do that. I didn't realize that I needed to like publish the potency of the mushrooms that I'm growing on the internet, and start the same thing that we're seeing in cannabis, right? You see the ethical cannabis, which is, you know, seed to store, you know, supply chains where everything is being watched. Like, is this cannabis industry, is everybody getting paid, right? Are we not engaged in indentured servitude, modern slavery, which, I mean, we can talk about the prison industrial complex at another topic right now. But really, it's like for some of these products, especially the natural products, like the naturally occurring psychedelic substances, a lot of people are like, oh, yes, I like this ayahuasca is harvested from this land, and we make sure that everybody who's working on that land is paid a living wage, and blah, 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 blah. And I see it a lot in the tourism and retreat center model, a lot of this indentured servitude. It's like, come and do your service work, and we're never going to pay you enough to leave. And so now you're going to be here as our, like, basically indentured servant at this retreat center, and we'll just keep giving you more medicine. And you can drink medicine with us, you know, every weekend. And also, you're never going to be able to leave. And then you're it's like there should be contracts. There should be, I'm going to go down for 3 months. This is my compensation package. And when I'm done for 3 months, I have to return to my life because I'm not running away with the circus. Although you and I both know plenty of people who have run away with circuses before. We've been part of the same circus sometimes. And so really kind of starting to ask these questions. I don't think that there's great, you know, MDMA or recreational ketamine like supply chain things, and also the LSD supply chain. You know, here in California, there's a very violent history of like gang violent history around LSD manufacturing, and what happened with the Grateful Dead family and the Hells Angels back in the 60s and 70s. And so start asking, hey, where'd you get this from? Do you know where you got it from? Some people will be like, no, I don't. And like that, and great, is it tested? Cool. Do you think we can get like more ethical? Do you think you can find out more information? Like the more questions we start asking, the supply chain gets better. And so for some things, like cannabis, psilocybin, like ayahuasca, San Pedro, things like that, you can ask if it's ethically sourced. Chemicals, a little bit harder.
Do you have patients that you prescribe psychedelics for, and do you ever do it with them?
Great question. No, I'm not a prescriber. Because of the positionality I have put myself in the psychedelic community, I do not do any underground work. It's important to have somebody who's able to freely talk about this without compromising my license in any way, shape, or form. Therefore, I only work with ketamine because that's the only thing that is available to be prescribed right now. When I worked on the MDMA clinical trials, we did obviously use the clinical trial MDMA for that. I work with 3 different prescribers in Southern California, depending on the client and where they're located and what their income level is and all of these different things. And so I only work with ketamine. I very much look forward to the day in which I can work with other substances. I also, really work in this integrative space when people have had challenging experiences and are looking for longer integration. And so I really like helping people kind of pick up the pieces and make sense of what happened. In the facilitator taking medicine with you versus facilitator staying sober, there are some lineages, especially like ayahuasca and psilocybin, where facilitators take a lower dose or small dose of the medicine along with the rest of the ceremonial circle. In clinical settings, especially if it's one-on-one facilitation for something around psilocybin or for pharmaceutical psilocybin or MDMA, I do not think it's ethical. There's no reason for me as a facilitator in a position of power to be altered with, that is a recipe for harm and misunderstanding, right? It's I'm the one who's supposed to answer the door if the cops knock on it. And so I can't also be altered. And so I don't think in those settings that a facilitator taking a medicine that is not associated with a trained lineage that takes medicine in that way is appropriate. I've definitely seen harm come out of situations like that where there have been misunderstood or crossed boundaries around facilitator taking medicine with a patient. But if you're getting together with your friends, as long as somebody stays on the ground floor. If I have a group of friends if a small intentional group is getting together and everybody is going to take a certain substance, if that facilitator, if that peer support individual, the designated person who is supposed to be there, wants to smoke a little bit of weed or something, or does their whatever their head changes because they're not in that position of power, I think that's okay too. But that's a personal opinion.
You said you've talked a lot about harm and a lot about risk. And we've talked previously about maybe trying to rebrand a little bit the phrase harm reduction to risk reduction. But after this conversation, I'm seeing a lot of the potential harms too. So in what contexts, when you're talking about the actual psychedelic compounds, is that more where you would describe risk reduction? But when you're talking about the set and setting and the facilitation, that's when you would use the word harm reduction? I'm just curious if there's a distinction there.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So some people in the harm reduction community, harm reduction was born out of the HIV/AIDS crisis in New York in the 1980s and is very much attached to things like the opiate crisis and safe injection sites and things like that. And sometimes I feel like the harm reduction community felt like the psychedelic community was appropriating their language and making things a little bit harder to understand. I also understand that there are 70% of people out there who don't experience harm and think that it's beneficial. And so when we talk about the industry as a whole, we want to talk about how do we reduce risk for everyone. And when we talk about harm, it is the harm that was experienced, right? Because you don't experience the risk. The presentation was a risk reduction plan to avoid the harms that could get perpetrated.
Thanks, Erica.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions for you before we close out. We have these rapid fire questions that we ask every guest.
Oh God, I didn't know this was happening. Great,
You're
because
gonna-
I didn't do my homework and watch other videos before I came here. Shit. Go ahead.
That's all right. It's kind of the invitation just to share the first thing that comes to mind. And I just want to hear, my first question is, who is your greatest influence and why? Top two?
Okay, well, right. Personal influence, who has done the most, I would have to say my parents. That's my parents are amazing. And so I would definitely say, greatest influence of my life, mom and dad, for sure. And then, the first thing that came to mind, I was like, Trey. Trey Anastasio, the lead singer and guitarist from the band Fish, would be my great. That's the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me. So I'm gonna go with Trey.
Yeah. That's amazing. I really felt so like sweet when you said your parents too, and Trey also. Cool. And then my next question is, if you're willing, will you share a little bit about a memorable psychedelic or altered state experience that you've had?
Yes. And I don't talk about this publicly that often, but I will talk about it here. And maybe my parents will forgive me for saying this on recorded camera. I would say that in 2010, I had finished grad school and was really, really struggling with life. I was 2010, how old? I was 28 years old in my Saturn return, finished my master's degree, burned out on social services in South Central LA, which is a hard environment to be in, and was experiencing a lot of mental health symptoms, experiencing a lot of anxiety and panic and things like that. And I had a long period of self-imposed abstinence from all substances. And I got to the point where I was thinking about taking SSRIs or going on some sort of medication to help support my anxiety. And a friend of mine suggested that I go drink ayahuasca. And I went to an ayahuasca ceremony, and I have been in remission from panic disorder for 14 years and haven't had a panic attack since my first ayahuasca ceremony. Mm-hmm. And so out of anything, it would be that. It shifted. In that ceremony, I realized that there was a part of myself that I was repressing that was this very cosmic exploration part of myself. And I was like, I'm an adult and I'm a professional and I'm not allowed to do those things anymore. And that voice inside of we need to do this work was getting really loud, and I was ignoring it, and that was the root of my anxiety. And now I have a healthy self-practice around plant medicine, and I'm incredibly grateful for it.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. It feels super celebratory.
Yeah.
And my last question for you is there a psychedelic or substance that you're fascinated with but haven't yet tried?
Yeah, actually, I haven't tried Kana. Oddly enough, it's kind of like I've been a classic 5 psychedelic kind of girl. Is like I know the medicines that work for me and the ones that resonate with me, and I've very grateful to have opportunities to have tried, to been exposed to environments in which I could try many different psychedelics, and oftentimes say no, because I'm like, I do all of this work. This is a lot of work to do, and also be a psychedelic explorer and have enough space for integration. So it's very rare that I actually engage in a good psychedelic practice. And so because those times are so few and far between, given the work that I do, it's like when I have those times, I want to like stick with what I know instead of try something new. But I'm seeing a lot more Kana in the Southern California community. I know it's an unscheduled substance and a plant medicine, and I just haven't really like given myself the time or space to do the like educational deep dive and then find the community to do it with. But I'm definitely I've seen enough people give me positive trip reports around it that I am now curious to be able to try it. There are some substances out there that I'm not curious to try also. I have no desire, there's no calling to do Ibogaine or Iboga for myself. If that medicine calls to me, I'll happily try it. And I also think the Amanita muscaria people are kind of weird. It's not really my medicine. I see the Amanita muscaria chocolate bars out there every once in a while, and I'm like, really? Like, okay. But like again, it's like if I only have so much time in my lifetime, like is that really the avenue I want to go down? And so yeah, that would be. I would say Kana on the positive, and then Amanita muscaria on the like no interest list.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I hope you to explore Kana in your future. It's been a very positive and gentle experience for myself, and I'm grateful to have had explored it. Wish
Great.
that for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you, Erica. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we close out?
Thank you guys for spending your evening with me. Thank you, Jacob, for having me and inviting me here. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with me. I'm really grateful. And I would say that given my work with survivors, that if somebody comes to you saying that they're concerned about something or they got harmed by someone, believe them. Like, listen to them. Don't gaslight them. Don't say things like, what are you talking about? And that never could have happened. Like, just like, don't be a dick about it, kind of. And like, if somebody's trying to be vulnerable with you, hold space for that. That alone will just like help us heal community.
Beautiful.
Oh, also donate to Shine if you're everybody like right. I have to like shamelessly self promote all of my nonprofits that are in funding. So nestharmreduction.com. You don't have to donate there. It's a private company, but I have a nonprofit, shinesupport.org. We are on a fundraising campaign to raise enough money to support psychedelic survivors and create sustainable funding models to catch the people that we know are going to get harmed. Also, shameless plug for Shefa. I'm on the board of Shefa, which is the Jewish Psychedelic Support Network. We're trying to help create spiritual Jewish context around psychedelic practice, and that's shefaflow.org. And so if you are Jewish identifying in this community and are looking for a psychedelic community that has a Jewish context, shefaflow.org. Also, come to more District 216 events. This has been so much fun. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. Thank you all for coming out.
Thanks.